Oftentimes in life, I think we struggle with hope. We struggle to really believe that God can do what he says he's going to do. In Romans chapter 4, Paul talks about Abraham. And God made this promise to Abraham that he would be blessed with this inheritance of generations of people in his line. But Abraham had never been able to have a child. We all know the story. He was very old. He was 99 years old. God had made this promise of an inheritance of generations, of a line, a glorious line that his generations would continue, that they would number more than the sands on the seashore and the stars in the sky. And Paul says in Romans 4 that against all hope, Abraham, in hope, believed God. Against all hope. It says later that though Abraham was as good as dead, he still hoped that he could have a child. Though as good as dead. He looked at his body all shriveled up and old. Have you ever seen a 99-year-old? He looked at his body all old and shriveled up, and he still believed that God could do it. He still believed that he could be fruitful. He still believed he could be a father. That he and Sarah could give birth to a child. Even though he looked at his body, he's as good as dead, the scriptures say. And I think for us, what is promised to us? What is promised to us is that we are children of God. What is promised to us is that we will be like him, that we will shine like stars in the sky. There's all these beautiful promises that we will be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect. There's all these promises of joy, unspeakable joy, of fellowshipping with the angels, of the glory of heaven, all these promises. And yet, our world is full of darkness, and our lives are full of darkness, and our lives are full of failure and anxiety. And there's so much about this world that is dark and dreary so often, and we struggle with hope. But Paul wants us to know we have good reason to hope. And so he talks about, as we've put our faith in Jesus, we have gained access by this faith in Jesus into a grace, into a new realm of grace in which we stand. And because of this, because we stand in this realm of grace, this new place in the world, where even the darkness and failures do not hold us down, because we stand in this place of grace and victory, we boast in the hope of the glory of God. We boast in the hope. Even as Abraham looked at his body and he was as good as dead. And sometimes we look at our lives so far from perfection. And we look at the world so far from perfection. The world and our lives, we're as good as dead. We can't believe that we would ever be destined for glory, that we would ever be destined for the new life, the abundant life, the perfect life of God. But just like Abraham, though as good as dead, trusted that he could have a child. And Paul is saying, though we are as good as dead, through our faith in the promises of God, we can have hope in the glory of God. We have hope. And then he says, not only this, but we also find glory in our sufferings, because sufferings produce perseverance. Perseverance produces character. Character produces hope. And so God works together in all things. This is taken from Romans. God works together all things for our good, even our sufferings. Because through our sufferings, we learn perseverance. Through our perseverance, we learn character. Through the character that's developed in us, we are more hopeful. And so everything in this world that comes against us, that threatens this hope, actually in Jesus, in our faith in Jesus, builds up our hope. It makes us hope more in the glory of God. It doesn't push us to despair as it would without Jesus. Without Jesus, when I lose a loved one, if one of my children died without Jesus, I would despair. I would wallow in despair my whole life. I would wonder what the point is. I would be angry at God. I would be lost. In Jesus, if I lost a child, I would grieve. But in Jesus, I would learn perseverance in faith. And I would develop character. And I would experience joy in that grief. And actually my hope would rise in Jesus. My hope in the glory of God, my hope in the restoration of the world, my hope in my ultimate destiny in heaven would rise in the midst of that suffering. What a promise. Nothing nothing can come against us. And Paul says in Romans 8, what can separate us? Therefore, what can separate us from the love of Christ? Nothing. Nothing in this world. Everything is used for glory to rise up in our life. More glory, more hope. What a beautiful truth.